Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to this discussion organized and hosted by the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, ELIAMEP, under the title Ahead of Italy's Elections, What is at Stake? My name is Alexandra Voudouri. I'm a journalist and ELIAMEP's research associate, and I will be the moderator of this timely discussion with three distinguished speakers. Mr. Nino Galetti, director of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung office in Rome. Buon pomeriggio. Andrea Dessi, head of the Italian Foreign Policy Program, senior fellow at the Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa Program, editorial director and commentaries for the Istituto Affari Internazionali in Italia. And Mr. Tzogopoulos, senior research fellow at ELIAMEP, lecturer at the Centre International de Formation Européenne. My Italian is far better than my French, I'm afraid, and I'm sorry. I think that we do all acknowledge the importance of these early elections on September 25 for both Italy and the European Union. Next Sunday, Italian voters are expected to choose a new government after the collapse of the National Unity administration led by respected technocrat Mario Draghi, a right-wing coalition led by Giorgia Meloni, leader of the former fascist Brothers of Italy party, is likely to assume power and will face the triple threats of slowing growth, rising inflation, and the threat, of course, of further Russian energy crisis. So we will explore what is at stake, both domestically and, of course, vis-à-vis Italy's relations with the Union, the European Union, and its position in the world. So with no further delay, I would like to begin with Mr. Galetti. So, Mr. Galetti, first of all, are Italians happy with the fact that they're going to vote next Sunday? And why is far right expected to win the election? This is a question that we all do after the first polls were published. I think that for quite some time now, we don't have any opinion polls in Italy, but of course, the far right was on the lead, at least in the latest opinion polls. Thank you.
Do Italians like to go to the vote? Yes, sure. Italians are Democrats, and it's a democratic duty to go to vote. That's for sure. And at the same time, there is not really there is not the mood to go to the election campaign. We just talked about election campaign in the preparation talk, and we saw that you saw some election campaign stuff in Rome, but outside Rome you even don't see it, and it's almost like people are very tired and they are not very interested in politics anymore, because in the last 10 years, 20 years, politics was a little bit like tiring in Italy. So many people were very content with Mario Draghi as a prime minister, and they didn't really understood why politicians, why the two chambers were voting against Draghi and didn't give him the confidence of the parliament.
Well, Mr. Dessi, however, why Italian voters seem to be attracted to Giorgia Meloni's party? This is a question that most people have in Europe at the moment, even though there is a trend right now of a rising far right in most EU countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to ELIAMEP for organizing this important talk. I absolutely agree in the sense that Italians, generally speaking, are happy to return to the polls. We are a democratic country. We do give a lot of importance to the electoral cycle. It is also true that Italy has not been to the polls in quite some time, last time within 2018. So there is definitely a need to return to the polls, to the ballot box, to hold the pulse of the Italian political setting, to see what it's changed and how it has evolved. With regards to your question, your specific question on whether and why Italians seem to be flocking to the hard right conservative party of Giorgia Meloni, the Brothers of Italy party. This is quite a broad question in the sense that, first of all, we must emphasize that the last polls of 9 September, point to Meloni securing about 25% of the vote. So it is not the entire electorate that is flocking towards Meloni. That said, of course, the polls point to the fact that the Brothers of Italy party will be the first party in the parliament and therefore is leading the right-wing bloc. There are a number of explanations that can point to why Meloni is gathering such support. The first, I would say, is that she is an untested party. She does have neo-fascist roots, but at the same time, she has never been in government, whereas all the other parties have been in and out of government. She was the only political party to be in the opposition to Draghi's unity government, and this definitely gave her and her party an advantage, being in the limelight, also in a sense normalizing the positions of her party, because she was seen as the only opposition party and therefore received a lot of room and a lot of attention also in the media.
Well, thank you so much. Back to Mr. Galetti. You mentioned that Italians respect democracy and etc. But I was wondering whether, as Mr. Dessi mentioned, the party of Giorgia Meloni was not participating in the previous government, the unity government. What has, if you agree that this could be one of the reasons why Italians will vote for this party, and additionally, will there be a high percentage of voters participating in these elections? Because usually when there is a low turnout, far-right parties are helped when voters do not go to the polls. Thank you.
Well, in the last polls, 40% of all voters told that they haven't decided yet if they are going to vote or not. So 40%. So I think many things could happen since then. And there's 1 week left until next Sunday. And we see that in Italy, things can change very quickly. So there are two news which have come. One was the catastrophe in Middle Italy with this high rains and with up to 10 deaths. There's my question, if for young people, maybe it's a kind of climate change issue and they will go to vote in the sense of climate change and the party who will do something against climate change, number one. And number two, last week we had these reports on financing political parties in Italy by Russian and by the Kremlin. Well, just today, Mario Draghi told that this wouldn't be true, but it was a message during the whole weekend that there would be some parties, Italian parties, which were financed by Russia. So I think in the next 5 days, we will see a lot of news which will have a certain influence on these 40% of voters who aren't yet decided.
I will get back to both of you regarding the revelations of Russia's meddling in Italy's political scene, because it's not the first time that we actually hear about Russia's meddling with certain political parties in Italy. I would like to go to Mr. Tzogopoulos. Good afternoon, Mr. Tzogopoulos. Is Italy yet another case of a pattern that has unfortunately but slowly becoming clear in Europe, that is, far-right parties are attracting large numbers of popular vote, and in Italy, most likely the power itself? What are the reasons? First of all, Sweden has been one of the latest cases, and how should Europe respond? Is it a responsibility on behalf of the European Union to respond to this trend, or is it the responsibility of the political scene of every single member state? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, and also thank you to our great speakers for joining this ELIAMEP event, Dr. De Galetti and Dr. Dessi. It's our great honor to have you on board today. Obviously, your question, Alexandra, is the one which is highly interesting right now in Europe. and in the West in general, I would say. And to some extent, it is related to the ambitions that Russia might have in the context of the continuation of the invasion in Ukraine. In other words, Putin bets on the problems and the cohesion problems in several European countries due to the existing economic and energy problems generated by the invasion and the chaos that has followed. And obviously, it seems that Italy is one of the countries right now that will be a very important test, not only for the cohesion of as an important European country in that regard, but also the result of the election and the policy of the new government will be critical as far as European responses to the Ukraine crisis are concerned. According to my knowledge, and obviously both Dr. Galetti and Dr. Dessi can join the debate on this, it seems to me that Meloni in particular seems very, very strong in the message that she sends as far as transatlantic relations are concerned and the continuation of Italy's policy in support of Ukraine is concerned. In that regard, it seems to me, according to the messages at least, she tries to send in an environment which is not stable. You mentioned before also the case of the financing of political parties, that Meloni in that regard wants to show both Brussels and Washington that if she wins the election, there will be no important change as far as the policy of sanctions is concerned and as far as the continuous military support of Ukraine is concerned.
Well, thank you so much. Going back to Mr. Dessi, one question would be whether these revelations about Russia's meddling with Italy's political scene and more likely with Matteo Salvini's league will have any effect, any impact on the Italian voters, because we've seen similar revelations, and I thought and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there has been similar revelations in mid-June. Again, about secret meetings of Matteo Salvini's advisor meeting certain Russian officials. So I was wondering first whether there will be an impact on how Italian voters will vote on Sunday after these revelations. Are there any discussions, any debates in Italy about this issue? And second of all, Giorgia Meloni has sent the right messages to both Brussels, Washington, because obviously there are concerns about the next government. Are these concerns justified whatsoever? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Both are extremely important questions. You are completely right that it is definitely not the first time that we have allegations and rumors circulating in the media, also in the US media, about Russian interferences in the Italian political scene. These allegations have in particularly impacted Salvini's Lega party. The first time that really serious allegations emerged was back in 2019 when the Lega had just joined the Five-Star Movement in creating the first populist party, first populist-led government in Italy. So I think that it is not new in the sense that we know and the Italian public knows about these allegations. However, the media and the debate, the political debate in Italy is extremely fragmented and extremely partisan. So within certain sections, definitely in the left wing, there is concern, there is debate, there is discussion, and there are calls for investigations and for proof to be really finally provided for these allegations. On the other side, however, in the right-wing bloc and even in the hard right-wing bloc, these allegations are generally characterized as interferences from outside. Indeed, it is unfortunate that we do not have the smoking gun, as they say. There is no real proof. Unless the real proof is out there, it is very hard to make these allegations impact voters who would already be inclined to vote with the right-wing bloc. Within the right-wing bloc, the Lega party is the one that definitely has the most established connections with Russia. I think it's important to underscore that the Lega party still has an official political agreement with United Russia, with the party which of Putin's party, and has still refused to cancel this agreement. However, the other parties also have in the past embraced Putin's Russia in various domains. Of course, Berlusconi was the first leader in Italy to really open the doors to a political relationship with Russia and with Putin, also in terms of economic interest and trade. And Meloni has in the past, in her books, in her memoirs, also talked about Putin as an important leader, as one of the most important leaders in Europe. So there is this constellation of a fascination or flirtation with Russia, with other nationalist and forces also within Europe and also in the US. However, I do not think that these latest revelations, unless we are heading towards a so-called October surprise, will really shift the balance of the electorate towards against these parties. We are waiting for the smoking gun in this respect.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Galetti, as I mentioned before, Ms. Meloni has sent the right messages to the international partners of Italy, and especially regarding with the war in Ukraine. I was wondering, however, how Italians stand at the moment vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine, whether they have been affected, their financial situation has been affected anyhow, and how this might have changed their attitude towards Italy's position on Russia, on the war in Ukraine, and whether this could be a point that the new government, the new coalition government, will be enough for them to change Italy's position regarding the war in Ukraine, the sanctions against Russia, etc., etc. Thank you.
Well, I don't think so. That Italy will change under government led by Giorgia Meloni is its politics towards Russia, towards Ukraine, and towards NATO. We were very astonished when we hear, it was the 12th of August, when Meloni was talking to the foreign journalists in Rome. She was talking in English, in French, and in Spanish, and she was talking quite well. And I have to say, Andrea will allow me to say that Italians aren't very good in foreign languages normally, and even Italian politicians aren't very good in foreign languages. But she was speaking in these three languages, and it was quite good. Unfortunately, she didn't speak in German because she was once telling in her book that she doesn't like Germany and she doesn't like the German language. But okay. No, she is very, it's very important for her to show up to the foreign journalists and to foreign politicians that she is an extremist and that Italian politics won't change when she will be Prime Minister of Italy. So I don't think so that the politics towards Russia, towards Ukraine will change with the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. It's not important for her. I think emotionally she's very tied up to United States and to the Anglo-American culture, not to the Russian one and not to other ones.
However, this is not going to be a government. This is going to be perhaps a government led by Giorgia Meloni, but Matteo Salvini will also be part of this government, and that is why I thought that this coalition is another question, whether this coalition could be solid, because we've seen lately some press reports that there have both leaders, Meloni that is, and Matteo Salvini have their own disagreements. And we are wondering how solid this coalition government could be. Mr. Dessi, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are big and significant question marks hanging over the aspect of government stability, government durability, and the infighting in the relationships between the three leaders. It is not only Meloni, Salvini, but there is also Berlusconi, which is the third major member of the right-wing coalition. Each of these three leaders have been united politically in terms of their pursuit of power and their pursuit of finally achieving government. However, when we look at the specific politics and the specific policies, there are significant divisions. There are significant areas of gray, let's say. However, I agree with the previous speaker in the sense that with regards to Ukraine, with regards to Russia, these differences are rather slim. And I highly doubt that there will be any break with established Italian policies towards Russia, towards Ukraine, including in the domain of support, military support for Ukraine. That said, the issues in which the three leaders deviate the most are economic issues and also the relationship with Europe or the understanding of Europe. It is interesting to see in this respect how Meloni has no doubt toned down her anti-EU rhetoric in terms of this process of trying to normalize her figure, her image as a leader. However, underneath the surface, there are some elements that cause concern. I think the most important element that causes concern, and is also a division with Salvini, are the elements of financial resources and the budgetary resources and the fiscal stability of Italy. Both leaders have called and have made rather unrealistic electoral promises to increase pensions, to cut taxes, all elements which require a significant amount of funding, which Italy unfortunately does not have. And therefore the debate now between these two parties is how much debt Italy can actually make, given that our public debt to GDP is one of the highest in the world and not only in Europe. There is the significant concern in Brussels that this government would try to push the boundaries of Italy's public debt. And there is also significant disagreements between Salvini and Meloni in this regard. Berlusconi is in something of an interesting turnaround of history, is now acting as the institutional guarantor of this coalition, trying to place himself as the figurehead to reassure Europe and reassure markets that he, within this coalition, will maintain a balance and will make sure that the government will not deviate too far away from Europe or away from Italy's traditional foreign policy anchors, which are the European integration and the transatlantic alliance. This is quite an about-face in the sense, if we remember Berlusconi's somewhat tainted reputation back in 2011 or even beforehand when he was leading Italy for many, many years. But the aspect of government instability is definitely something that we will be hearing a lot about if the polls are correct and this government is indeed formed. In this respect, I remind our audience that Italy has something of a record. I mean, the average length of a government is 14 months in Italy. In the past 75 years, we have had 67 governments and 30 prime ministers. So it is, again, there is continuity, as we heard, in foreign policy, but there is also continuity in our fragmented political setting and the aspect of government instability. And this will probably continue as well with a Meloni-led government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tzogopoulos, we are hearing all these reassurances by all three political leaders, by Silvio Berlusconi, by Giorgia Meloni, and by Matteo Salvini. Their messages are heading to Brussels. So why are Brussels so much concerned? Are Brussels concerned about the huge Italy's public debt? Are they concerned about the stability of the government? Or are they concerned that this coalition could flirt or even create a coalition with the other troublemakers in the EU, namely Hungary and Poland? Thank you.
Well, at first, it seems to me that the most important reason for Europe's concern is the departure of Mario Draghi. So at first, there will be a comparison between the new Prime Minister of Italy and Mario Draghi. And as we all know, Mario Draghi is very respectable, and the way he managed to lead Italy in difficult times was endorsed not only by Brussels, but also by the majority of Italian citizens who found in Mario Draghi a person and a leader who could unite different political forces. So this comparison itself, obviously, will make the day after quite complicated, even if in the end, the result won't be as problematic as it is hoped for in Moscow, for example. Of course, at the same time, there are some slogans, especially in the political rhetoric of Giorgia Meloni regarding the European Union. And in cases of election campaigns, we are all very experienced about what to expect from politicians. They are trying to promise that they might be able to renegotiate with Brussels to put the national interests at first, and that kind of issues, which can sound very nicely, but in practice, we have seen that the room leaders do have to negotiate is rather limited. So with the exception of this political communication strategy, I would not expect a serious crisis in the relationship between the new Italian government and the European Union. However, at the same time, there are important issues that need to be taken into account, and these are relevant to the implementation of the plan for the Italian economy that was proposed by and it was started to be implemented by the government of Mario Draghi. We have seen that Giorgia Meloni, for example, has proposed to take some funds from this package, and instead of carrying out structural reforms, to help with social policies and so on. In that regard, we might see some divergences and a difficult climate in the negotiations between Rome and Brussels. But as far as the general orientations is concerned, I wouldn't say that the day after is expected to be very, very problematic.
Mr. Galetti, do you agree? I mean, are Brussels' concerns justified, and on what issues is this possible government led by these three parties change? I mean, will there be a change in the financial policy? Mr. Dessi mentioned the promises that they are making, and perhaps this could lead to a further problem, financial, it will add further financial burden to Italy. What policies are expected to change? The migration, the finance, what?
Well, first of all, I would like to add that I'm not really sure that there will be a right-wing government in Italy. That's always a question. We are talking like this would be clear. There are polls that the right alliance will have a majority, but still 40% of voters aren't decided, number one. Number two, we don't know if the right alliance of Meloni, Salvini and Berlusconi will hold up to next Sunday and after. I don't see the motivation of Berlusconi and Salvini to give Meloni the chance to become Prime Minister of Italy. It might be, but it also might not be, because there's a certain concurrence between these three party leaders. And already in Italy, journalists were talking about another kind of coalition, not about a right-wing coalition, but about a so-called Atlantic coalition, a coalition of those parties who are in favor of the NATO line against Russia and in favor of Ukraine. So this would be parties like Fratelli d'Italia of Giorgia Meloni, but also the left-wing party Partito Democratico. So I don't see right now that Salvini and Berlusconi will give the chance to Giorgia Meloni to become Prime Minister. But even if this right-wing government will come to power, I'm skeptic that they won't have an ideological project. And I see that the ties between these parties, I'm speaking now about Fratelli d'Italia and about Lega, the ties with those with Polish government, the party's name is PiS, or with Viktor Orban in Hungary, are very close. And I imagine that somebody like Giorgia Meloni has already discussed with Orban and with the head of government in Poland about the behavior of Brussels. How far can I go until Brussels will give me a reaction? And I think Meloni is very aware about this. And so I'm a little bit skeptical. Prime Minister Meloni won't change everything in Italian foreign politics, but I think there will be some difficulties. For instance, in migration politics, for instance, in other parts like family politics and societal questions.
Mr. Dessi, do you agree with that? I mean, do we have the possibility of another coalition government? And second of all, Mr. Galetti mentioned that perhaps Hungary and Poland are already paradigms for Giorgia Meloni not to follow the tactics, let's say, of Viktor Orban or her Polish counterparts. However, at the European Parliament, I think her party was one of the parties that voted against the motion of the other Eurodeputies regarding Fidesz and Hungary's government. So are you expecting any kind of, let's say, closure of Meloni with these two governments in case she's leading a right-wing government coalition? And another question that I would like to ask you, supplementary to this, since we haven't talked at all about the center-left and Partito Democratico, what has been the failures of the center-left to form a coalition, and why they don't seem to have the lead at the moment, since they have shown a great responsibility while participating in the national unity government under Mr. Draghi? Thank you.
Thank you again, Alexandra. Let me first of all reflect on the aspect of a possible new other coalition. I think that, of course, you can never say never in politics, especially perhaps in Italy, in the sense that there has been a lot of shifting coalitions and shifting alliances. Just to think that in the space since the last time Italians went to the polls in 2018, we have had 3 different governments. However, am slightly less I would say slightly less convinced of the possibility of this new coalition or non-right coalition or Atlanticist coalition emerging from the elections. I think that there has been, to the best of my knowledge or my understanding, a decision or an acceptance by the PD, the Partito Democratico, that it is ready to sit in the opposition and play its cards as an opposition party for the foreseeable future. As I said, no one really believes that this government will last for the entire legislation. It will probably be a highly unstable government within which the opposition will have many openings to be able to try and regain its electoral support. The PD has not been in opposition for many years, and I think that for the center-left, this is also in some respects increasingly being framed as a cold shower on one side, but also as a necessary passage to be able to then return to the electorate with a more convincing message. Of course, again, you never say never in politics. Aspects could happen. I would imagine that the one element that could create this division is a Berlusconi, the party of Berlusconi pulling out of the hard-right coalition. He has already warned that should the government or Meloni and Salvini stray too far towards the anti-European right, he would be ready to defect the coalition. However, I think that as things stand now, the bet is that this coalition will hold at least to begin the government, also as a way of ensuring power and political influence for each 3 of the parties. So I think that in this respect, there is fear and concern, and I would say also justified concern in Europe and Brussels, that this right-wing government will increasingly look to others such as Hungary and Poland and align itself ever so more towards these parties. However, again, this does not imply that Italy will break with established parties, will break with Brussels, or will implement 180 degrees variation in its domestic or foreign policies that could cause such a break. It will be more likely that there will be sympathies, there will be contacts, there will be rhetorical support for these actions. And you are correct to highlight that both Salvini and Meloni's parties voted against the recent motion against Hungary in the European Parliament. And it's not the first time. So the established links are very much present. But there are also other established links. There are established links with the Vox in Spain. There are established links with Marine Le Pen in France. So it seems to me that they are trying to bide for their time in the hope for their side from their standpoint that we are beginning to witness a return of conservative right-wing politics, populism within Europe, but also across the Atlantic and the US. The links between Meloni, Salvini, and the Trump administration were extremely solid, especially if we think of Stephen Bannon, for example. And these are the galaxies and the political orientations in which these parties are looking. And this is concern for Brussels. But again, it's not only an Italian story. There are other examples across Europe. And so the more established parties, pro-European parties, will have a hard time and also a lot of work to do to convince electorates, not only in Italy, but in other countries in Europe, of the benefits and the real concrete benefits of European integration and membership of the European family, compared to others which have a much more nationalistic view of the role of member states within Europe. A final element to highlight, I would say, is also that one concern for Brussels and for other countries in Europe is the opposition of Meloni's Brothers of Italy party to any notion of overcoming the veto power in foreign and security policy in Europe. This is an important element because without qualified majorities or differentiated integration in Europe, it is very hard to imagine the continuation of the EU reform process. And this, I think, is a way to block the reform without breaking established politics or alliances, and therefore hand a semi-victory, let's say, to those forces within Europe, Hungary and Poland, which are opposed, again, to this overcoming of the veto power.
That's a very interesting observation because the latest developments regarding the EU are focusing exactly on this, whether there should be an abolishment of the veto rights and whether there should be a change in EU treaties. I mean, the President of the European Commission has supported a possible change of treaties in her speech for the State of the Union in Strasbourg last week. I'm not sure whether Europe is ready, Mr. Tzogopoulos, for such a change, and whether small countries like Greece will be ever in favor of the abolishment of the veto rights.
Well, as far as smaller countries like Greece are concerned, it is crystal clear that due to the sensitivity of the issue, due to geography, and obviously the elephant in the room is Turkey, it's very hard for Greece to proceed to such a decision, such a change, a shift in its policy without having prior to such a decision relevant security guarantees. However, at the same time, I would like to say that irrespective of the result of the Italian election, from a Greek perspective, the most important issue in mind, the most important theme on the agenda is the continuation of the excellent collaboration which characterized Greek-Italian relations in the previous years and led to the signing of an important agreement on the demarcation of the exclusive economic zone of the two countries that supplemented the relevant agreement of the 70s about the continental shelf. And more importantly, from a Greek perspective, The previous Italian government continued this policy of settling its maritime differences with other neighbors, like it did with Croatia, a development that was welcomed by the Greek government. So Greece's hope in that regard, especially due to the sensitivity of the issue with Turkey, goes beyond the future of the European Union into practical issues that can possibly show to the international community that countries of the European Union and other neighbors in the Eastern Mediterranean have an opportunity to solve or settle or bridge differences by following the international law of the sea that our neighbor of the East refrains from doing. And in that regard, Greek-Italian relations and the harmonious evolution of Greek-Italian relations on the basis of the international law of the sea is a paradigm of how differences between states can be solved and for states to proceed together by finding midway solutions.
I think in any way, relations between our two countries will never be damaged by any government, especially after the agreement that Mr. Tzogopoulos mentioned after so many years. Back to you, Mr. Galetti, because you're representing Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung as its director. I was wondering about relations between Rome and Berlin, and what are the expectations on behalf of the German political scene regarding the outcome of the Sunday's elections in Italy, and how things might change from now on?
I don't think that many things will change. In Berlin, the people are very attentive to the election in Italy because Italy is the country Germans love most, we could say. Many Germans are going to make vacations in this country, and not only to the beaches but also to the cities, and Germans love really Italian culture. But nevertheless, the interest is very high in Germany. Now, concerning the politics, I think it might be a problem for CDU party because they see that our partner is Forza Italia right now, or until now, and they get more and more weak. So what will be the consequence? Who will be our partner in future times? If Forza Italia is getting weaker more and more, we have to search for new partners. Could that really be Fratelli d'Italia? Could that really be Lega? I don't think so. But it's interesting to observe what's happening right now in the Fratelli party. In 2018, there were only 4% of the votes for Fratelli Italia, and until now they have about 22 senators and deputies in the parliament. It's clear that now they will be over 100. Who will they be? Will they be mostly conservative politicians, but reasonable? Or will those be some extremists, some people who love the time of Mussolini, etc.? For me, it will be a surprise because I don't know yet. We looked already to the lists to the electoral lists, and we will at the end see who will really represent the Fratelli party in the parliament and what will they really do. And this is one of the concerns Germany has.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Dessi, what about Rome's relations with Paris?
Well, thank you. I think much of the same applies. I think that the point that was just raised by Dr. Galetti is excellent. The aspect of personnel and the lack of personnel, or the question marks hanging over who will fill what post, not only in the high-level posts of government, but also, and perhaps more importantly, at the lower levels and within the cabinet and within the bureaucracy. This is a big question because especially Meloni's Brother of Italy party, there is a significant lack of skilled and experienced personnel. This, in fact, brings me to another point, that there is already some speculation about who will fill the different posts, and specifically the foreign ministry post, for example, in a government. A lot will depend on the figure who fills out this post. and a lot will depend on the percentage between the three parties. There is an expectation, or most people expect, that Meloni will become prime minister. The foreign ministry will be instead handed to Berlusconi's party, and there is talk of, for example, Tajani becoming foreign minister. This would be a tactical move, let's say, by such a coalition, in the sense of putting the party with the most international experience and respectability, for some respects, in the post of foreign ministry, specifically to be able to reassure partners such as Germany, as we just heard, and the same would last also for France. At the same time, I did mention before of the elections. The recent elections in France are also another question point or alarm bell, let's say, of rising tides of conservative populism across Europe. So I believe that with France there will be trouble on the horizon. There will be mistrust between the three governing parties if in fact they govern, and the French and Macron's government. At the same time, there may be also closer relations behind closed doors, maybe between Meloni and Le Pen and the National Front, and this would create problems in the bilateral relationship. Draghi, of course, was very well respected not only in Europe but also in France, and the relationship with Macron was very solid. We also have to remember that there was recently signed Italy-France political agreement, very high-level political agreement between the presidencies of the two countries, and this was supposed to launch or relaunch Italy-France relations not only in Europe but also, and perhaps more importantly for these two Mediterranean countries, towards the Mediterranean, such as finally being able to overcome certain problems that had arisen between French and Italian policies towards the Mediterranean through this high-level agreement. With the prospect of a right-wing conservative government led by Meloni, this implementation and this effort to regain trust between the two actors or key actors is definitely going to take a hit. And the result will probably be a more sidelined Italy, not only with regards to France, but also in the broader European framework, in which Italy will have more trouble to bring its prerogatives to the table, to influence European policies, especially if the government chooses to embrace other states such as Poland and Hungary, which are already on the outskirts, on the margins of decision making within Europe due to their backsliding in democratic norms and infringements on the rule of law. These, however, elements for Italy to implement similar policies as those adopted by Orban or in Poland in terms of violating rule of law or established prison rules is very hard to imagine. Again, because of the opposition. And also, again, I think that it's important to emphasize the role of the President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella. I said before that Berlusconi's party is now acting as the institutional guarantor of the coalition, but we have a higher guarantor, a constitutional guarantor, in the person of Sergio Mattarella, who will absolutely, as he has done in the past, intervene if there are elements that are infringing on Italy's constitution and therefore also on the rule of law and our European vocation.
I totally agree with you. I would have made the same comment, Mr. Dessi, about Giorgio Mattarella, the president of Italy's Republic, because he has shown in the past the responsibility towards the powers that he has from the constitution, and he has been there in similar situations when the political situation in Italy was fragmented again, and this led to elections and coalition governments. One last question, Mr. Dessi, you've mentioned that everything will depend on the person who will be at the foreign ministry. Is foreign policy designed by one person, or is it the outcome of the government? Because that was a question that I have following your statement. And will there be any change towards Italy's interests and relations with specific countries of the East Med, and including Turkey, which we are more interested to hear? And I don't know whether Mr. Tzogopoulos has a question for you too. Mr. Dessi, thank you.
Absolutely. With regard, I should probably moderate what I said before, in the sense that not everything depends on the figure of the who will fill the post of foreign minister. I meant that a lot of the efforts that have been put in place to reassure partners and normalize the image of the government or a potential government will depend on the figure of the foreign minister, which of course will have to interact with Italy's partners and allies abroad. And in this respect, this is why I think, or I predict, that the most respectable, between brackets, of course, party to fill this post could be that of Berlusconi. With regards to the percentage, Berlusconi's party is polled at 5.5%, which is very low if we compare it to the 25% of Meloni, or the about 13% or 12% for the League. So, of course, the balance in between the three parties is very clear if, in fact, these pollings are correct. And it is true to underline that the 40% of the population has still not decided who to vote, and so anything could happen. I think that with regards to foreign policy, Italy has a tradition of continuity across governments, across our history of government instability, which ensures that Italian foreign policy remains within certain planes. Of course, rhetorically speaking, and statement-wise, there can be changes, but Italy rarely, if ever, strays from the three anchors, let's say, of the European integration project, transatlantic relationship and support for NATO, and the Mediterranean pillar, where it rarely, again, deviates from any policy that is not backed by the US or the European Union. I predict relative continuity in this respect, independently of who fills the post of foreign ministry. What I do predict, however, is less experience in conducting diplomacy and conducting foreign policy, and therefore errors of judgment or errors of rhetoric can be expected, and these can, as we all know very well, create carry-on effects as well in terms of political alliances and more general alliances. On the US and on Russia and Ukraine, I highly do not expect any deviation, specifically because a deviation in those important, enormous elements would really undo all of the work that has been done over the past election campaign to try to normalize the image of this government. With regards to the enlarged Mediterranean, as Italy or the Italian Foreign Ministry approaches the third pillar of the Mediterranean, which extends all the way also to Iran, again, I do not expect significant shifts. I expect a continuation of an alignment with the US positions, also with regards to the good relations with Greece and the developments in the Eastern Mediterranean. With regards to Turkey, there may be a bit of a colder relationship, rhetorically wise, most definitely. Italy has extensive economic interest and energy interest with Turkey. These will survive and will probably grow even further given the need to find new resources of energy. And this brings me to the Eastern Mediterranean, which within the three parties of the coalition, but also in the other opposition parties on the center left and other parties, the Eastern Mediterranean is receiving ever more importance, ever more focus as a resource, as a source of new energy and gas reserves. That said, I think that some parties are still believing in the possibility of building the East Med pipeline, something which, however, we have heard very disparate opinions and very unfavorable opinions, both in terms of timeline and in terms of costs. I think more probable will be an effort by Italy within the European and the transatlantic frameworks to try to help and support any kind of effort of reconciliation, or at least of detente between Greece and Turkey, respecting international law, respecting, of course, the EU membership of Greece and Cyprus in this respect. And therefore, I think that there will be a continuation. But I wouldn't expect or hold my breath to look to Italy or to Rome to advance a proactive new policy or strategy or diplomatic plan to try to break the stalemate. More likely it will be Italy trying to follow initiatives of others, especially Germany, but also the Commission perhaps, towards the Eastern Mediterranean, where again Italy is very interested in attracting new energy resources, especially from Israel and Greece, Israel and Egypt, but potentially also Greece and Cyprus.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, finally, I would like to ask, how do you see yourselves the next day for Italy? after the elections on Sunday, and whether a new, if we don't have an agreement among the parties that we have talked throughout our discussion, is there a possibility of a new technocratic government in Italy, or the people and the political scene cannot afford yet another technocratic government? All of you, Mr. Tzogopoulos, should we begin with you so that we can end up with our distinguished speakers? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra, also for the excellent moderation. Just to sum up, I think that it is a scenario that can be on the table, but it's not the first that we would right now focus on, taking into account that the election is taking place this Sunday and people will have a say up to what extent they prefer the center-right or the right coalition or the center-left coalition. Just 3 remarks regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. From a Greek and from a European perspective. From a Greek perspective, it seems very interesting to me that Salvini, for example, in the past made some remarks in favor of the construction of the East Med pipeline, and he appears also to be very close to Israel. So we have to wait and see up to what extent the new Italian government will re-energize this plan, which is very difficult to be implemented, but the new landscape due to the continuation of the war brings it back to the agenda. The other is up to what extent, and in relation also to what Andrea said before, Italy will not push but support the inclusivity of the so-called East Med Gas Forum. As we all know, Turkey and Lebanon are not part of it, but Israel and Lebanon are talking to each other, and we have to wait up to what extent also Turkey might be part of the board if it respects the rules of the majority. And the last remark is relevant to the so-called multilateral dialogue on the Eastern Mediterranean, which is a European idea. And in that regard, both Germany and France are interested in playing a role. And within this context, the new role of the Italian government in moving forward with negotiations can be very, very constructive, as the inclusivity is a key element on how we might and should imagine the future of the Eastern Mediterranean.
Mr. Tzogopoulos, thank you so much. Mr. Galetti.
You were just asking about the possibility of technical governments in Italy. I think there's always the possibility of technical governments in Italy. You just have to look into the past and you will see that in the last 10 years, twice we had a technical government. And I observed that technical ministers are very appreciated by the Italian public. And so people won't be disappointed if there will come another technical government. Personally, I don't think that this will be the case right now after the election, but maybe during the next 5 years of the next mandate of the parliament.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Dessi.
Thank you. Thank you again for your excellent moderation as well and for the invitation. With regards to the possibility of having yet another technocratic government after the elections, I do share Dr. Galetti's point in the sense that I do not think that it will be an automatic or straight move into yet another technocratic government. More probable will be a period of right-wing or hard right-wing conservative government characterized by instability, new political crisis, and then potentially a return to a technocratic government if history is of any lesson for Italy. However, I think that it is a testament to the amount of popular support that Draghi's government enjoyed that there is still talk, notwithstanding there being an election in 7 days, of the possibility of having Draghi come back and kind of saving the day yet again, given that there is some concern of what could happen with a right-wing coalition. At the same time, I think that just building on the point that was made before with regards to personnel, we know already that Meloni herself has spoken with Draghi and asking advice on who, if anyone, from Draghi's present government could stay on to join her future possible government. including technocratic ministers. So, for example, the Minister of Energy, Cingolani, will most likely be kept in place. So there will be certain areas or islands of continuity, even in terms of personnel from Draghi government to a Meloni-led coalition. I think, again, this is perhaps a testament to the strangeness maybe of Italian politics and the shifting chairs of Italian politics. But I think that is, on the whole, a positive element that we are returning to a political government and not a technocratic government. Just a small aside, I think that Draghi was, yes, a technocratic government, but also a highly political government because it was supported by all the parties. But in general, I think that one of the key reasons, and I had forgotten to answer your point on the Partito Democratico on the center left of why it has lost its kind of support. I think one key element is also this aspect that the Italian populace is somewhat disillusioned and sick of technocratic governments. They would like to have a say, a direct say in having a political government, and would like to therefore proceed with elections and with a strong political government, whichever color this is. I think it will be positive for Italian democracy, for Italian understanding of itself, but also for the important battles that necessarily will have to be played out in terms of protecting civic rights and the political setting internally. Because as we have known and seen from other right-wing coalitions, the implications or the changes, the shifts are most present and concentrated at the domestic level with regards to economy, society, rights. These elements are the ones which are most prone to changes with right-wing conservative governments. And this could be an injection, an infusion of much needed politics, also on the side of the left and the center left, who will have to demonstrate their ability to play the political game and perhaps constrain certain elements of this new government. Thank you.
Well, we thank you for this interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it. Mr. Galetti mentioned that Germans love Italy. I would say that most Europeans love Italy, including Greeks, and Italian politics are always of an interest to the Greeks and the rest of the Europeans, and not because of the turbulence that Italian politics create, but anyway, Italy is the third economic power in the EU, and much is dependent on what government is in Rome. We hope for the best. Italian voters will choose wisely, we hope, on Sunday. Thank you so much again for this interesting discussion. Mr. Galetti, Mr. Dessi, Mr. Tzogopoulos, thank you again. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.